In today's episode, meet two leading voices of the automotive industry. Dr. Olga Kryapchenkova from NIO Europe, Experience Manager for AI Voice Assistant, and Augustin Friedl, Mobility Expert from MHP, a Porsche company. Follow them into the fascinating world of artificial intelligence in our podcast studio in NIO House Berlin. Welcome to House of NIO. Welcome, Olga and Augustin.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Hi, Augustin. So nice to see you here.
Likewise. Glad to be here, Olga, with you today.
And especially interesting to talk about one of the hottest topics today, right? The AI in the very many applications that it has today.
Yeah, I mean, we see there a lot of interest in the industry to implement that. Yeah, so it's fascinating to see that NIO was so early with the voice assistant already in 2018 to launch it in there with the vehicles. But now we really see the interest of across the whole industry to first understand, okay, what does it even mean? Yeah, what is generative AI? How could I implement it in the user interface? How could I improve the user interaction in the car, or how could I maybe then also use it to link the car to other ecosystems around weather or around news, etc. Yeah? So how could I then bring them more use cases, more content, more, let's say, quality time to the users in the car with this technology? But maybe a question to you. So are you surprised now that so many of the OEMs are jumping on this generative AI voice assistant or voice assistants improved by AI train that you started early on? Or would you say, okay, this was kind of obvious?
I expected it, but I didn't expect it so early and so massively, which is why I would say, positively surprised. Now we are in the topic, we are improving, we are working on it, but I think the most important part is to make the shift from thinking about it into actually getting it into production with the first use cases.
User requests.
We use Nomi very simply as a feedback channel.
Yeah.
So you can say, hey, Nomi, I want to give feedback. Hey, Nomi, I have a suggestion. Hey, Nomi, I want to complain. So whatever is on your heart, you can spill it to Nomi, and Nomi listens to you. And it's not only recorded and sent somewhere and then it just disappears.
Yeah.
We have a channel for this because, of course, you cannot just set a feature and not do anything about it. There has to be the back end, right?
Yeah.
So Nomi is just the front end. And the back end is what we call the user closed loop system. That's the system according to which the user feedback flows directly into basically feature development.
Yeah.
And that's really amazing how people then feel heard. Because to feel heard, it's a big pain point of every customer in the product, right? Yeah. Not just saying, hey, thank you for your feedback, we are going to act upon it, but actually doing something, and that helps us in our development cycle and getting feedback on the features. And the AI can help here, of course, in the recognition of the problem. And then I would say the most important thing in AI here, or specifically also generative AI in both, actually, that we can scale faster. Because, of course, if 100 people ask us for 100 features, we don't have resources to deliver them all with the next release. But sometimes the features can be bundled in groups.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where generative AI becomes so strong, because it can help you scale. It can help make features in batches. I can give you an example. For example, with the last release, we got out the feature about the car manual, right? The users want to use the car manual, but the car manual is complicated. Mm-hmm. And while driving, people cannot really read through it in detail because of the cognitive load. And then people would ask, hey, Nomi, tell me about ACC, Adaptive Cruise Control, or tell me about this, and how do I do this? And now Nomi is able to extract this information from the user manual. Then we use the retrieval augmented generation, the grounding technology RAG, and together with our partner, Microsoft, OpenAI model helps us there. We basically get them the answer in a very short manner so that he can read it, get informed, and act upon it.
Yeah.
User first.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think one observation there is, you mentioned you're not a software-defined vehicle company, or you don't have software-defined vehicle approach as the industry is talking about. It's more customer-defined vehicle approach. And then also you are not a product manager, but an experience manager. So you put there really the customer first, right? I get the approach needs to shift, from product first to customer lifetime first, to always come from then the customer customer, like take the feedback from the customer from different sources. Yeah, so with Nomi, and I think you also have like the NIO app, or could be also like would have been a great source for like then feedback and features or bugs, etc. And then basically derive from there then the feature set and then the software, and then like okay, at the last point the hardware. So basically flip around this process, and it's quite interesting or impressive to see how then like a company like NIO is like doing this already. I think this could be also quite an inspiration and for the traditional automotive industry, or also for suppliers in the space and there as well.
That's true. That's what I learned at NIO. I think to strategize a little bit independently on the solution first, right? To follow the dream.
Market change.
I work with customers. It's then often about, okay, what does it cost and what is then my return on invest later on? Yeah. So, and then
great question of everyone.
Yeah. And then maybe also how could I earn money with that? Yeah. So maybe first simple question. So at the moment you don't charge for like Nomi. Could this be something like in the future that might change? Yeah. That there might be then also kind of a fee to use the Nomi or like AI in the car? Or would you say it's like always baked in and this is then always like comes with the car when you get it?
At least for now, our strategy is more like we want to offer a unique, smooth experience where Nomi helps to get all the other in-car and outside of the car features together. Nomi is part of the ecosystem, and we don't charge for this. Nomi is a user interface, and a user interface, it's basically for us a way to give the users another opportunity to use the car in different ways and to promote this joyful lifestyle, which is one of our experience principles. And for now, I think that is something that makes sense to offer it as part of the package. Of course, the question of ROI is important to us too, how to monetize it. So one direction is, of course, how the voice assistants actually impact the purchasing decision. And I remember there was a very nice report also about it. Of course, the voice assistant is not the number one decision. But not the number one decision criteria for purchasing the car for the customer. But what is very important that the car is at the latest technologies, and the car offers a window to the latest tech that the market has to offer. And I think people really enjoy it, right? Because AI is something that some people are afraid of. And if the AI is in your car every day with you, it helps you, it serves you somehow, it makes your life easier and more pleasant. Then why not? And I think that's important.
Yeah, fully agree. And then to this point of monetization, so I personally also have there my questions if then like other automotive OEMs could monetize that. Yeah, so if then like there are some players like NIO and others who basically have like this feature set in the car and the consumers are expecting it. Yeah, so we can say it becomes maybe more commodity. Yeah, so AI, voice assistants, etc. is then part of every car. And then also if it's this direction, it will be very hard to like sell it as a like feature on demand or additional feature. Yeah.
I have a comment on this. I think it is important to understand what the product is. So the product for us is the car, and Nomi is part of it, right? We don't sell Nomi as a separate product, and which is why it's not Nomi who knows more and more and more, who is given or sold or offered to the customers, right? But it's Nomi who facilitates the experience in the car, and I would say it's a lot about the smart cabin, right? So we want the user to spend his time or her time in the smart cabin, not just being driven by the car from A to B, but really this experience. I do not waste time in the car. It's not the time that I waste. It's the quality time that I spend with my family, which is why, for example, Nomi is so important for the kids also. And it's the quality time that I spend with my music. It's the quality time which I spend with my technology, which I buy together with the car.
AI models.
Should we move on a bit into the technology direction?
I was waiting for this question.
Okay, perfect. So from an outside perspective, I had like the impression, okay, like NIO was developing like a lot of technology in-house, like with more like a vertical approach, less like horizontal with partnering. I think now, a couple of months ago, you announced that you in for Europe, you will use then also like a partnership approach with like open or with the open AI GPT model. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. So what are there maybe the differences, or like first what is the technology setup, and then maybe what are there the differences between like China and Europe?
I would say if we speak about make or buy, we do a lot of make. We do buy.
Yeah.
We cannot stay without buying for certain aspects, especially if we want to get the best quality on the market. But we do a lot of stuff ourselves, and we have really talented developers.
Yeah.
When you think about generative AI implementation, that's first about training that's first about preparing the data, right? The feature engineering, like labeling the data.
Yeah.
Then it's about training the model. And these parts, I think they are really very often better done by those who are specialized on this, right? Because we are not a provider of machine learning models for generative AI in the first place, right? We are providing the end customer experience. We follow a lot every week what comes to the market, but we don't have to implement it every week. Also for the other reason, because everything is use case specific. As we said, problem first, and there is a large set of problems or the pain points that we want to do, of deltas in customer experience that we want to achieve. And sometimes they work better with different models. For example, here, like getting a little bit off from NIO and in general to the market, for example, mixture of agents, right? It's something that kind of made a whole big thing on the market recently, right? That you can actually make the models work together. Once those technologies get out of the market, you can also combine them and see like who performs better for which use case, and you based on the confidence score, like you pick the best model, and that actually reflects very well what is good for business.
AI, a black box?
But I would say this explainable AI, it's super important also to earn like trust from all the different stakeholders also. I mean, like you could often get the impression AI is like a black box. Yeah, you throw something in and then something fancy, interesting comes out. You don't know if it's like true or not. Yeah, so I mean that's also like hard to like basically work or like rely on. And then, but if you have then like also this approach to get it understandable by breaking down like a big AI model into different like smaller parts and then try to understand that, etc. I think that's super important from the engineering side to understand. Yeah, because then you can basically optimize, but I would also say it's getting more crucial from like a customer or consumer perspective, because they also would like to understand, okay, what's happening basically in the black box, and how do I get the answers or etc. the results in there, and then also from regulator side.
On the one hand, everyone, and by everyone I mean almost every business, wants to do AI. On the other hand, specifically about generative AI, it is unpredictable, right? If I don't think that if customers come to you and say, I want 100% control over the result, you can give it to them. That's not possible. And I think that's what people didn't understand in the beginning. They wanted the 100%. Now they are kind of more and more ready to live with this. And exactly by educating, by implementing explainable AI and responsible AI technologies, I think that's the way of mitigate those concerns. What is important is not only development, but also testing. I think the generative AI offers us the necessity to review our testing approaches. And I don't necessarily mean the automated testing that is done anyway, but also the final product testing, both the user acceptance tests, but actually the end-to-end testing that is done by quality assurance teams. Because before you could actually just test all scenarios if there is a fixed tree. Now you cannot do it anymore. So you have to go by vast majority.
I think this is quite a challenge then for the industry, that it's like a process that's always evolving. You can't stop it basically, and you need to adjust to that, and then also expect that something could go wrong. I think also that needs to like trigger mindset shift and like in more traditional players as well. Because with AI, you ship something where something could go wrong, and it completely doesn't fit with like the narrative the automotive industry or some other players like told in the past. We ship something and it's always ready, nothing will happen, etc. But with AI, you never know, and anything you need to respond to.
And exactly, and that brings me to the point that implementation of a specifically generative AI makes your company more robust, more agile, more modern per se.
There was like in the industry a lot of discussion about like Apple, and Apple will like enter the AI game, etc. Now they have with kind of like humanized or like more like human approach, more integrated approach. So it seems to feel less technical than what we know maybe from like the chatbots, etc. So what is your perspective on that? So what would you say, like how important is the human aspect of AI and the human aspect of like experience AI and the integrated like aspect of that. I mean, how do you think about that at NIO, and how do you implement it at NOMI?
You are most certainly in the right place with this question. So at NIO, we actually prefer this approach, human first, so personal things first. And you can see our NOMI, right? Yeah. It's an anthropomorphized AI, right? It's a human-like AI. And that was actually the message from what I remember from our CEO, William Lee, that while talking to the voice assistant, you shouldn't necessarily talk to the air. Yeah. You should have some point of reference. Yeah. And I think that kind of helps people normally to A, not be afraid of the AI, B, have more cognitive trust, and C, be more relaxed and more natural also in the commands. Yeah. Because when you talk to a very like strict system with a like very technical UI, you tend to be rigid. You don't express your thoughts freely. Here at NIO and with NOMI, we actually are aiming at the person talking to the car as talking to a companion, emotional companion, productive companion. I think the definitions can be different from country to country. We offer a global perspective too, but that's very much dependent on the person. But that's what we like about it, right? You communicate to the technology smoothly without having to robotize your voice and the way you're expressing yourself.
AI user expectations.
I could also imagine that this is important for like long-term adoption. Yeah. So what I realized then also, if you look at other voice assistants like Alexa, etc., so was like was a technology like without the human touch basically. And of course there maybe was like a hype for first years or also if you look at ChatGPT, everyone wanted to try it out, but it felt like, or it feels like very technical. And then after time, I would assume, okay, that leads then also to like less usage, getting less interesting. But if you have the human touch, I could also imagine that like the interaction with like then the AI and the assistants will stay longer.
I think everyone was at a certain point at the peak, at the hype, the hype cycle, right? Then somewhere at some point we dropped down because people were speaking about it like, well, it's a gimmick. It cannot really help me. It cannot recognize me. For example, I remember recently a guy I know who just came to me and, you're like in the voice assistant business. Like mine doesn't work. It doesn't matter which brand. It's like, why isn't it working? And I was like, well, let's start from the beginning. So people were really frustrated. And I think now with the integration of large language models, specifically in the car, but also in other voice assistants and in chatbots, the chatbots and voice assistant have a very fresh chance to show how useful they actually are. And I think now it's an excellent point where we are actually coming to that plateau of productivity. But, of course, it's very different for different countries, right? Because there is, of course, a global attitude to the whole, that it's useful, that it can be used for productive purposes. But like emotional attachment to those assistants is different from country to country. And I find it really exciting how technology kind of combines and unites people from the very different backgrounds, making this whole thing a global experience because those models, of course, are pretty international, right? Some of them can be trained on a variety of languages. But on the other hand, how people perceive the technology, that's a different aspect. And I think that is still very different, both on end customer level, if we speak about, let's say, B2C, but also how businesses see it differently. And I actually notice it in my everyday life by working together with inside an international team with China and Europe. I really find it exciting.
Yeah, I could just add to that. Yeah, how you really need to have like the local expertise, I would say, to capture what's going on in the market and then basically translate that and does the customer wants and what does the customer needs, and then have the differentiation. So that this one fits all approach that a lot of OEMs or companies have in mind, I think that's not going to work.
It sounds as though you had been with us during that journey. There was again indeed quite an interesting point, right? So we came with NOMI from China to Europe with originally more of a Chinese vision, and then we globalized it. And we really noticed that's something we very openly talk about. So people were complaining that the car talks too much and produces too many sounds. And that's where our closed user loop system, right, came to play. And that was really amazing to see how we came to our Chinese colleagues also with user feedback. And they were like, interesting, that works different for us. That was difficult, but very exciting. And in the end, I think now we are in a good way way. We really regulated it more. And here, that's a good point of how people perceive technology differently. They want more feedback, as you say, both visual feedback in terms of the graphical user interface, and for the voice user interface, it's like more talking, but also for the sound interface. The other thing is the level of control. I had a feeling that the European users, whatever they were using, they wanted the possibility of changing it.
Or switching it off.
Also,
if they don't do it.
Absolutely. That's what we, for example, heard from people with Nomi. Like, I love Nomi, but I want to be able to switch her off.
Yeah.
Just that it gives me a feeling of I can control the technology. And that's not how it works with Chinese users. And I find it perfectly fine. Nomi is an emotional companion.
Yeah.
And how an emotional companion is defined in China and in Europe, well, these are pretty different things, I would say.
Assume.
Yes. And I also did lots of research for Nomi and outside of Nomi about how people perceive those technologies. Of course, finding out that the levels of adoption are different.
Yeah.
People are more ready, or rather ready, in Asia, specifically in China, to engage with those experiences. I would say also the kids are kind of super ready to contact or the technology, or to stay in touch with this technology, to use it on everyday basis. Whereas here, I don't know, parents are a little bit more concerned what happens with the data, how to use it. And of course, this is not really about Nomi, but about, in the general situation, the uncanny valley concept, right? So when the technology looks like humans, which is not the point of Nomi, because Nomi obviously doesn't look like a human, but I think it is getting also more important with the generative AI in the image generation phase. Like, how similar does it have to be to the real thing to become weird? And these levels are different. And how can you find it out? By user research.
And I could also assume that timing there is important. So if you're then the first one, which has like an AI assistant that's like too human, maybe then you get a lot of pushback and customers or people say, okay, that's weird, I don't want to use it. But if then there's more adoption by more and more players, etc., over time, I think there you also need to balance out in the right timing to release that to the customer. Then I think that's also super important.
That's true. The right time, also what is happening on the market, that's important, what people's expectations are. And of course, the cognitive trust. And the cognitive trust is built on qualitative feature. So in the end, you can never go away from the good quality. And this is done by the good team. That's why the approach is important to value people and to find the right people to the team and the right people to implement your AI projects. Thank you so much, Augustin. That was a pleasure to have you here in our first episode of season 2 of House of NIO.
Thank you, Olga, for having me here today. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. And I hope for the listeners that we provide some education, more context, more content to like this complex topic of AI. And let's maybe sit together in a year to see how far we came within a year and what changed, and then to discuss it again.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Olga and Augustin, for these exciting insights of artificial intelligence, and see you soon in House of NIO, a NIO podcast.